Hello everybody. Today I did this video segment talk about the history of video games in 5 minutes or less. Now the history of video games really is very argued about whether when it started and all. A lot of people argue that it started in the 50s, kind of right after World War II, around the Soviet Union era, Cold War era. And it's really argued a lot because a lot of people believe the first game was created in 1958 on an oscilloscope. William Hugobert's, I believe, Tennis for Two. But there's people argue that too because there was a settlement case between Magnavox, and Nintendo in 1985, I believe. And Magnavox ended up winning because Nintendo was suing them saying, oh, it was this, the original game was in 1958 on an oscilloscope. But they claimed an oscilloscope was kind of different, I guess. But there's a lot of controversy. But anyways, you could probably consider that the first one. They began developing prototypes in the 1960s for different arcade games and stuff, and trying out stuff. Pinball was kind of the main thing back then, which is, it's not really gaming, but the little brown box, which was for the Magnavox Odyssey system, which was going to be released in August 1972 by Magnavox, was developed, its prototype, in 1968, which is at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Now, Ralph Baer, when he released the Magnavox Odyssey Council in 1972, originally wanted to price it probably around $20. But Magnavox Odyssey, of course, had everything in mind and priced it for $100, which was a lot of money for the early 70s, It's a long time ago, man. But, yeah, he priced it for that much. Now, I have a Magnavox Odyssey, and I can say one thing, it's very outdated and it's kind of bad. But the technology was a lot less developed back then, a lot more simpler. Now, not that long after that, Atari created the same year the arcade game, and it became a hit, was Pong. And it was around that same time period, 1972. But the first Pong home system was created in 1975 by Atari. And, well, it was getting developed around that year. And that became a huge hit. That was when video gaming started to take off a lot. Now, a lot of consoles got their first start around that time. The Bally Astrocade, ColecoVision was just around the corner, and television was starting to come up there for once. But the main hit system, one of the big forefathers, which really got things going, was Atari 2600. And that was released in 1978, and that really, really was basically an instant popular hit. It had so many games like Space Wars, Combat, tons of games, Frogger, real lot of games. I mean, ColecoVision, a lot of those had a lot of them, but it was an instant hit on the spot. Also, Magnavox Odyssey 2 was created in that same year, and that was a pretty big hit too, but still really overshadowed by the Atari 2600. That was the main hit of that era. Now, when the 80s came along, Nintendo started getting more into the game. They created the Nintendo TV games in Japan in the 1970s, late 70s to 77, but they started getting involved in America with the Game & Watch series. Now, he came up with that idea from seeing a guy with a calculator on a bus or train in Japan in 1979. And he came up with this idea because this guy was playing with a calculator to come up with a Game & Watch series to play a game portable. It wasn't the first portable. The first one was the Microvision, but it was one of the first ones, out at that time. Now, these games were really simple. They just contained one game on the single thing. It looks like a Nintendo DS in some sense, but very different and very, very retro. Anyways, not that long after that time, there was a video game crash in 1983. And that really hurt the market. It was just so many crappy games being released, mainly by Atari and different ones. And a lot of people thought gaming was almost done with, in some sense, because there was just so many crappy games. And it lasted from 1983 to 1985. Now, when they got out of it was when the Nintendo really redefined the whole home gaming system with the Nintendo Entertainment System. That was an instant hit, got instant popularity. Huge success, major success. Anyways, not long after that, Sega got involved. Now, Sega first got involved in Japan with the Sega SG-1000 system, which wasn't very popular. Really wasn't very popular. It was only released in Japan, not even in Europe or anywhere. The second model, I believe, was released in Europe, the Sega SG-1000 Model 2. But the first one was just for Japan. They released the Sega Master System in 1986, and it was to kind of counteract against Nintendo. Now, they did all right, not bad, but still very, very overshadowed by the Nintendo Entertainment System. Where Sega really got their game going was with the Sega Genesis, and that was released in 1989 in America and 1988 in Japan. The Sega Genesis was extremely popular, a huge hit, major. It really, really redefined gaming in some sense. The 16-bit era was really on its way. Nintendo, released in 1989, was really, a lot of people, you might consider as the first handheld system, as we know today. The Nintendo Game Boy, the real big fat console with the dot matrix stereo sound written on the top, and that really was very modern for its time. It was in black and white, of course, and stuff, but it's really one of the first on-the-go console things that could put cartridge slot games, play them, just like how you would do nowadays, But Nintendo wanted to counteract against the Sega Genesis. That's why they released in 1991, in August 1991 in America, the Super Nintendo, the SNES. The SNES was also a huge hit. Sega was one of the only ones, though, who really, really put up a big fight against Nintendo. They really were a tough competition. Sega really had the market for the sports games, but Nintendo still was very hard to beat on the platforming games like Super Mario World, different games like that. They just still had the edge on that. It was really, really a close time. That's why it was really a lot of commercials that were saying like Sega does what Nintendo don't. Different commercials of that time period around the early 90s to mid 90s. Really, it was a lot of arguments going out who was better, like for a Mortal Kombat stuff. Anyways, around 1995, the 3DO was released, and that wasn't amazingly popular. Also, the TurboGrafx, there was a lot of consoles released. The TurboGrafx was actually pretty popular, but one of the main consoles that a lot of people, it was kind of a rich kid console back then, was the Neo Geo. The Neo Geo is one of those consoles that you just hear kind of in rumors and stories. It's kind of one of those consoles that, my God, that was the Jesus of a console for a while. They had some of the best arcade games. It was an expensive console. Very expensive. The games a lot of times cost like $200, and the console itself was around I believe it was $1,000. Very expensive console. But the 3DO, as I was saying, didn't do that well. It did not bad, but they only made 2 editions of it, and that was released in '93, and then the next one was released in 1995. And Sega made many editions, many add-ons like the Sega CD, which really didn't do that well. They made the Sega 32X around 1994, I believe, and that didn't do that well, but they did a lot of different things to contradict. Now, towards the mid to late 90s, Nintendo released, or PlayStation came out, and all that, and Sega tried to contradict that with the release date with the Sega Saturn. They tried to, beat PlayStation by 5 months, but it really didn't work out. They didn't have a good game library, and PlayStation hung in there. They had, like Rayman and some games to start, but PlayStation really got some credit towards the end of its era, towards getting to PlayStation 2 time. Nintendo 64, though, really owned the rest of the 90s. It really, really did. It had just a huge game library. Major, stuff and everything, but it was really big. But not long after that, Sega tried to get back in on it with the Sega Dreamcast. Now, Sega Dreamcast didn't do amazingly well, but it was very, very underestimated for how ahead of its time it was. It had the first internet connection-based console, and it had a really pretty good library of games. It was really ahead of its time, especially with the memory card unit and all that. You could just take it on the go, and you could play little mini games on it. It was really ahead of its time. but unfortunately didn't do so hot. And around the 2000s hit, they really took a crap, and they kind of went more towards just helping other people. They mainly went to Nintendo, and they started being released on like the Game Boy Advance and stuff. Now, around that time period, PlayStation 2 took off. It just hit it on the markets, and it was kind of expected just because it was just going to be so modern for that time. It had an amazing library of games, and this thing is the shit. This is the new thing out. Not long after that, around 2003, the Xbox got released, and that was crazy popular for its online. Its online with Halo and different games was extremely popular. Nintendo got more involved with the handheld gaming and stuff, but the GameCube did alright, not bad, but not near as much of a success as the 64 or Nintendo Entertainment System. Finally, I'm sorry, this is more than 5 minutes. It's just hard to talk about all this, and I'm not talking about I'm only talking about like half of it, literally. I'm trying to sum it up. Anyways, guys, what I was trying to say, now almost to our time, to present time, 2012, PlayStation, obviously you probably know this, released the PS3, Xbox released the 360 in 2005. Now, the Xbox 360, they made two editions, like the Elite version, the black one, and the one you originally know, like the kind of the green, the white and green. And those were very successful systems. The PlayStation 3 also had on the original console where you could play the PS2 on it, play PS2 games, but you didn't have a memory card slot for the PS2, which kind of sucked. Now, Nintendo Wii was released in 2006, and they released the hit game, which really made the Wii take off, was The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, which was a hit game. Major big game. Stoked over that one. But, yeah, that's pretty much for the most part it when it gets to our time, of course the 3DS was released in 2011 in March. Different stuff like that. The PlayStation Vita, which was recent, but anyways, that's pretty much sums it up for the most part for just gaming system wise. I'll do more in depth on some gaming systems, but thanks for checking us out, guys. If you have any questions, leave me a comment. I'll be happy to help you, talk to you about a gaming system or something coming out, or if I missed something, please tell me. Bye.